Turning our attention now to Alaska, where day one of a sentencing hearing is underway for convicted killer Brian Smith. A jury found him guilty earlier this year of more than a dozen charges for the murders of two Native Alaskan women. Both 30-year-old Kathleen Jo Henry and 52-year-old Veronica Abachuk were found beaten and strangled to death back in September of 2019. Now, while being interrogated, Smith made a confession and later told this to investigative reporter David Scott.
First of all, that was a false confession I did there. That story was false. The police told me that they would not tolerate me giving the real story. And right at the beginning, the police also made it clear that they wanted to hear about sex. They asked me, what did I do with the woman that was my alibi?
That's what it was. The so-called short-haired woman.
Yeah.
She's never been identified or surfaced, right? I mean,
who said she wasn't identified?
Well, she's not in the record. Your defense attorney didn't produce her as a witness.
Yeah, no, we didn't bring her in. She got me confused with another man, somebody that had attempted to sexually assault her at one stage, and she got me confused with this guy.
Yeah. It sounds, Brian, like not much of an alibi.
My mind was buggered. My mind was buggered when that interrogation started. I knew I was weak. I knew I wouldn't.
They're offering you something to drink. They're offering you something to eat. You don't look like you're being tormented. You prolonged it. You asked them, you guys have to go home now? I got more to say.
That's because they asked me a question, I give them an answer, they're not happy with it. So I give it another answer. I try different ways of explaining it to them.
Then
so
I have 5 pages of quotes from your own lips, Brian, right? Full of admissions and confessions,
yes,
and acknowledgments and appreciation for the police and self-awareness that you've gone too far and now you're in deep shit.
Police said that they want to hear the sex side of things. So I gave them all the sex they wanted. That is non-confrontational de-escalation.
That sounds like a guilty man who's coming clean.
Well, then I did it well. Then I succeeded.
You did it too well?
I succeeded in de-escalating and acting non-confrontational. Right. I succeeded in that.
Why would you add details like defiling her corpse?
Once again, the police wanted that. It smelled.
Are you somebody who's incapable of telling the truth, Brian?
The problem is, when I speak the truth, people don't believe me.
And I speak the truth, people don't believe me. Well, before the proceedings got underway earlier, the judge told the court they would be using the victims' names as a way to restore their personhood. Let's listen to that together.
The essence of what happened to the two women that we're here about today is that they're, among other things, they were treated as something other than human. And they were dehumanized. And their names are out there anyway. Their names are in the public record and are being discussed by a lot of people in different places. It seems to me that the more respectful thing to do is to refer to them by name as we go through this process, rather than something less than full name. And that will help actually, to some tiny extent, restore their personhood.
Again, the jury found him guilty on 14 charges for these two murders. We want to take you now inside the courtroom for today's sentencing hearing for Brian Smith. First up, the court heard from the daughter of one of the victims. Let's go in.
It was an insignificant moment that became significant to me. I feel her all around me, watching over me. No one can take that away. This experience has taught me so much and has showed me true love never dies. Their family who cannot be here today, but wish they could. including my father, her grandkids, her daughter, her son, aunts, and uncles of mine. We all wish she had it so much better. It's a relief knowing the defendant will rot in prison. I hope he is swarmed with guilt someday, knowing he stole so many people's joy. I wish nothing more than the defendant lives the rest of his life without joy, and all down to the day he dies. To me, he will always be an unintelligent, sick human being who couldn't comprehend the meaning of life. John Prine said it best, some humans ain't human, some people ain't kind. Forget the defendant's name and remember Veronica Rosaline Adachuk and Kathleen Joe Henry. On behalf of my family and myself, I want to give a sincere thank you to Detective Brendan Lee, retired Detective Jeffrey Bell, Bristol Bay Chief of Police Jeff Elby, Detective Dave Corby, Detective Christy Mercer, Detective Christina Roberts, Captain Bianca Cross, Sergeant Jake Baker, Computer Forensic Brandon Hunter, FBI Special Agent Cellular Analysis Survey Team, District Attorneys Heather Norbrega and Brittany Dunlap, as well as their assistant John Bolton, the APD Crime Scene Unit, APD Parole, and Alaska State Crime Lab. Everyone at Alaska's Victims for Justice, but specifically Olga Ingram, Felicia Christian, and retired advocate Michelle Evans, Kathy Hansen from the Office of Victim Rights, as well as everybody who works there. Thank you all so very much.
Is there someone else to speak?
All right, we do need to take a break. I want to bring you a little bit of the color of the courtroom that is offered from our team that is following this, and that is that there are women in this packed gallery with a red handprint across their mouths. This is a symbol of the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement. We do need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from the state of Alaska. Let's hear what they have to say up next. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. So appreciative of your joining us today. Let's turn now back to Alaska, where we are watching the sentencing hearing for Brian Smith. He was found guilty earlier this year of more than 24 charges in the murders of 2 Native Alaskan women. Let's go back in now. We heard from a victim. Now we are hearing an argument by the state. Let's get back in.
Your Honor, the defendant, Brian Smith, engaged in purposeful and predatory pattern of conduct. He targeted some of the most vulnerable women in our community. He tortured and degraded and then discarded Kathleen Joe Henry and Veronica Adachuk for his own sadistic pleasure. The last moments of Kathleen Joe Henry's life were filled with fear and horror and helplessness that no human should have to endure, and he recorded it in narcissistic and flagrant fashion. Prior to killing these women, the defendant had bragged to his now deceased girlfriend, Alicia Youngblood, about murdering others. In his interview, he called that fantasy and boasting, but it is evidence of his mindset and his potential for rehabilitation or lack of potential for rehabilitation. As you're aware, the defendant had on his phone images of a woman whose identity has not yet been 100% confirmed. I attached those images to the sentencing memorandum because they were discussed in the interview but not shown to the jury, so Your Honor had not seen them. They show a woman who is helpless in the grass, in a fetal position, covered in blood. When confronted with these images at the airport, he described a sexual encounter after the death of Kathleen Joe Henry, where he left her passed out on the grass. He said he took those images to boast. Those images appeared to be more than passed out. Certainly, she was harmed. But those images show a complete lack of remorse for what he did to Kathleen Jo Henry and a continuation of the predatory pattern that we know he began with Ms. Abowchuk. When you're sentencing Mr. Smith today, you have a wide range that you have discussed of sentences that you can employ for each charge. And under the law, the state is asking you to find him a worst offender and sentence him near the at the high end of the range for the homicides, but near the high end of the range for the sexual assaults. When you look at the composite sentence, you have to find that he is a worst offender and that the confinement for the length of time that the state's asking is necessary to protect the public. I think under the facts of this case and Mr. Smith's behavior, that finding is really easy to make. A case like this does not come around often. For good reason. There are very few, as long as I've been doing this work, I still believe that most people are good, and there are very, very few truly evil humans in the world. Mr. Smith is one of them. He is a person that should never be permitted to walk among us. He should spend the rest of his life in jail, and your sentence should make a statement that the women's lives that he stole so brutally mattered. And that's why the state is asking for a mandatory 99-year sentence for the death of Kathleen Jo Henry. That sentence is warranted based on the substantial torture aggravator that was found by the jury. It's mandatory 99. But her life isn't worth more or less than Veronica Abowchuk's. What he did to her was equally cruel. He took her in off the street. She was impaired. He violated her. He photographed or filmed at least parts of it, likely all of it. I know it's deleted, but we have evidence that he filmed parts of it. He discarded her and he boasted about it. Her life is worth no more or less than Kathleen Jo Henry's. The maximum 99-year sentence for that is warranted. The state has laid out other appropriate sentences within the range for the tampering with evidence charges and the sexual assault and the second-degree charges. And when you look at the Cheney criteria and the things that you have to consider in sentencing, community condemnation. Your community is here, Judge. His community is here. And the community condemns these actions. Isolation, he needs to be isolated to the maximum extent and for the longest amount of time possible. And potential for rehabilitation. Somebody who brags and boasts about what he has done, who films and degrades the women while he is doing it, shows absolutely no potential for rehabilitation. There is true evil in this world, and it's sitting in this courtroom with us. Judge, and I ask that you sentence him to a composite active term of 226 years for these crimes. Thank you.
Sure. Judge, one of the arguments that I laid out in my sentencing memorandum and one of the points of law that comes up in our case law is, I think, especially relevant now given the nature of the state's argument, which is the court does have to consider the Cheney criteria. The court does have to impose essentially the lowest sentence possible that would achieve those Cheney criteria. One of those Cheney criteria is community condemnation, but what the state just asked the court to do was to sentence retributively. And the court is not allowed to do that. And the case law is very clear on that. It's referred to as a prohibited way to sentence somebody. What the state asked was essentially pay a life for a life, never let him back out because he's evil, and that is retribution. That's not community condemnation. That's not an appropriate sentencing goal. That is improper. What the court does have to consider is what sentence would achieve the Cheney criteria, which again, like I said, does include community condemnation, does include the extent to which somebody needs to be isolated. And what the state asked for was the longest amount of time possible for him to be isolated. The longest amount of time possible for Mr. Smith to be isolated is the rest of his life. Mr. Smith is already going to be incarcerated at this point for the rest of his life because he's getting a mandatory 99 years on count one. So that's been achieved. You can give him 99 years, you can give him 198 years, you can give him 400 years, and the length of time he's incarcerated is going to be exactly the same. And that's the point that I think we need to discuss about sentencing within the Cheney criteria and sentencing retributively, which is what the state is asking you to do. It would be easy to play into that and to say, well, you know, there's an emotional need for people to hear a big number. There's an emotional need to have a big number on the front page of the paper tomorrow. You know, people have been following this in the media. People have been following it very closely. There's a lot of emotion about it. There's been protests since the verdict, and people want to see a big number. But again, that's not what the court is here to do. I think Your Honor has done an appropriate job of listening to that, hearing it, taking it in. But there's a reason that sentencing is entrusted to the court and not the public or the press. Because the court is able to understand and follow the appropriate sentencing criteria and issue a sentence using that criteria. And I say that because, as I said in my brief, there's no functional difference between 100 years, 200 years, or 300 years. So in this case, based on the court's obligation under the law, we believe that the court has to impose a sentence of, again, I think, barring appeal, obviously, the mandatory 99 on count one. Beyond that, for count 9, murder in the first degree, 30 years, 50 years, 99 years is not going to matter. At least 30 of it has to be consecutive, so 30 is the appropriate number there. And while the state said that it wants to send a message that the lives are equal, and I've said this in a few murder sentencings now, I hesitate to ask the court to sentence based on the value of a life because that gets into relatively inappropriate consideration down the road. Because it's asking the court to say we're going to sentence somebody based on what the lost life is worth, which asks us to measure the worth of human beings in a, I believe, inappropriate way. And what the court has to do is consider the composite sentence here and what it is imposing in full. So even with the mandatory time, the mandatory consecutive time, I believe my read of it is you're looking at 132 years with 3 suspended is the lowest possible sentence that the court can impose under the law because of the mandatory suspended time and the mandatory consecutive time. And there is no difference between that sentence and a 200-year sentence. And because of that, we believe the court has to impose the lower end of that at 132 years and 2 days with the 3 suspended because it will achieve everything a longer sentence would achieve without leaving anything out. So as I said in the brief, that's what we're asking Your Honor to impose. As for the mandatory probation, we're not taking a position on the probation conditions. Based on the reality of the sentence, they're not going to matter, so we're not objecting to any of them. So, as you said in our brief, what we're asking the court to impose is 132 years and 2 days with 3 suspended, 10 years of probation on the conditions laid out in the PSR.
You can respond to the question.
No, thank you.
It's time for both sides to keep making whatever points they think it's important for me to consider. So, okay.
I don't have anything else, Judge.
Stay with us for more in this Alaska courtroom. The judge speaks next. He's already said we are using these victims' names to restore their personhood. Stay tuned. We'll bring you more.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, high drama in the Alec Baldwin manslaughter trial. We'll unpack today's biggest moments as our experts weigh in.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Who is Billy Ray Turner? How does he have any connection to Lorenzen Wright?
He was manipulated. See plans, he plotted. See the reason why he's gone.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. Sunday night, 8, 7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Now.
We are bringing you the sentencing hearing for convicted killer Brian Smith. He's facing 99 years in prison after a jury found him guilty of murdering 2 Native Alaskan women. Let's get you back into court. The judge has started speaking. Let's go in.
The mandatory 99 on count 1.
And I think I
Beyond that, for count 9, murder in the first degree, 30 years, 50 years, 99 years is not going to matter. At least 30 of it has to be consecutive, so 30 is the appropriate number there. And while the state said that it wants to send a message that the lives are equal, and I've said this in a few murder sentencings now, I hesitate to ask the court to sentence based on the value of the life, because that gets into relatively inappropriate consideration down the road, because it's asking the court to say we're going to sentence somebody based on what the lost life is worth, which asks us to measure.
All right, actually, we're going to come out and go back in just a moment to hear what the judge had to say. But just a reminder, more than half a dozen, let me start again, more than a dozen charges, 14 charges. That's how many charges Brian Smith was convicted of by a jury. And remember, this is the murder of 2 Alaskan Native women. There are individuals that are in the courtroom with a red handprint over their mouth supporting the murder of Indigenous women. Let's go back in to hear from the judge.
So if you haven't heard this and you have a tender heart, you might want to listen to this part. First, as I noted, the jury did find that count 1 involves substantial physical torture. That finding, along with the facts that I had viewed in the videos and that were established at trial and that have been provided to me in documents like the police report, the police interview transcript, leads me to the conclusion that count 1 is a worst in category or among the most serious murders in the first degree. But I need to go through and enumerate some of the evidence that leads to that conclusion. Evidence in those videos is relevant not just to this seriousness of the offense criterion, but it's relevant to several of the other issues I have to consider. So the first video clip, there were 12 video clips, and the first video clip didn't involve any speaking. It involved strangulation. Ms. Henry can be seen from the waist up. She's been badly beaten by the point this first video clip is hers. She has a swollen black eye, very swollen, a bruised face and lips, and she's already struggling for breath. In the second video clip, there's more strangling. And the number there is some narration or discussion by Mr. Smith. One of the things he says is, quote, unintelligible. In this video, he also punches her in the camera. Third video clip, among other things, he says, quote, and you're alive and you died. And you're alive and you died. So I guess I need to stop this because the blood is getting to the floor. As he's saying you're alive and you died, was upset because she wasn't dead yet. He's kneeling on her chest to make it harder for her to breathe. Among other things. In the fifth video clip, there's still strangulation going on. Quote, "Are you still alive? It's been like, what, 20 minutes? It's time to finish this fucking job, bitch." Unquote. In the sixth video clip, quote, "For my fans out there, hit the like." Here we go again. He also says people need to cooperate. In the seventh video clip, there's no speaking, just more strangulation. In the eighth video clip, he ties a cord around her throat, sits on her chest, fondles her breasts, while he's humming an AC/DC tune. Tightens the cord. She's very weak. He uses her own hand to slap her. Quote, "Fuck, bitch, you are taking so long. You have to be taught how to die these days." Unquote. In the 10th video clip, among other things, he kicks her in her vagina, stamps on her chest, stomps on her chest, again goes through the "you live, you die, you live, you die, you live, you die" game that he's been playing. He says, "Sadly, in my movies, everyone dies. I get the Oscar, bitch, only me." Please finish, I'm tired. In the 11th and 12th video clips, there's more strangulation, sitting on her chest, slapping with her own hand. She's obviously very weak and dying. At the end, he complains that his hands aren't as strong as they used to be. In addition to those statements, which are related because they're relevant to some things I'm going to discuss in a minute, he talked in his police interview about having violent sexual fantasies with his young blood, his girlfriend. And there's a lot of discussion about that, a lot of discussion about how he showed her some of the photos that he'd taken that were real in an effort to make the fantasies that he was discussing with his young blood more real.
We are approaching the top of the hour. We have to take a break. The judge ultimately sentenced Smith to 226 years total, just as the state requested. That includes 2 99-year sentences for the first-degree murders of Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abachar.